All right, guys, welcome to another episode. And please excuse the technical difficulties. We're trying out a new camera to see what it's like, but let's jump right into it. So, there's a few things that have come to my attention lately, particularly a few different events that made me actually look into this and find this project. And that is that, as little as I like to get involved in politics, I have to say that in the last handful of days, what I've seen, particularly from the United States section of politics, is that now that the election is over, there's a lot of politicians that seem to be butting heads before that are now suddenly getting along all fine and dandy. And there's tons of footage showing that. I mean, like Vice President-elect Kamala Harris is seen hugging and fist-bumping Lindsey Graham, who's known to be her staunchest political adversary or political opponent. And the point of that is this, which is politics is a show. Now, I didn't need the last few days of footage to tell me that, but it was just another reminder of that. And so it really made me think. So I've been doing a lot of research regarding underground bases, as you guys probably know. But the thing is this, what about experiments and above top secret classification experimentation that occurs not within the homeland, not within the United States? And so it got me looking into a couple different things, which is how I came across Project L.A.C.E. Now, Project L.A.C.E. stands for Low-Level Augmentative Crossbreed Experimentation, L.A.C.E. Very simple. And the idea is this. Actually, it's more than an idea at this point, but the document I came across was a document that proposed this, and it was classified above top secret at the time. Now, here's the thing. A lot of the experimentation having to do with crossbreeding, either EBEs, extraterrestrials and humans, or animals and humans, believe it or not, is mainly focused within China. Now, just hear me out before you say, okay, hold on a second. Within China, there are certain concentration camps that we, within the Western world, are just learning about in the last handful of months. And the thing about this that I find peculiar and very interesting is that there have been, at least according to the BBC, by the way, just over 100 Chinese concentration camps. That is insane. Now, what they use them for, there's many different reasons. And I know for a fact that they're using some of these camps to literally torture certain people that come to China and all that for many different reasons. And I don't want to get into that because it's a terrible thing and it is happening. So I'm not denying that that's happening. But we have to look beneath that. And so one of the reasons why the United States is not so tough on China, even though a lot of politicians, whether they're Democratic or Republican, talk a big talk on China, even though they don't really do anything. Maybe they'll throw some sanctions in or slap some, tough sanctions or tariffs on China. But ultimately, they won't do anything dramatic. Why? Because below the stage, and when I mean the stage, I mean the show they put on for us, there are tons of agreements. And so far, I knew this for a fact, and I knew that the U.S. had agreements with many different countries. But this document showed me that the U.S. and China are much closer than I had previously thought. Now, that's not to say that I believe the initial narrative of them being at odds with each other, but to see how in depth the things that are occurring there really are is what is scary. Now, they've been said to experiment with many different hybrid type species. Now, one of them is literally trying to combine a human with a lion. I know that sounds funny, but where exactly that tried to occur, I'm not so sure to be honest with you guys. The next one is they tried combining a horse with a lion, and then they've also used multiple reptilian-like genes to try and merge with humans as well. And now with regards to what type of EBE or extraterrestrial experimentation is going on there, it's very hard to say. The document doesn't detail that. As a matter of fact, it's so classified that I'm even a little bit hesitant to put the document in the link of the description of the video, but I'll do my best. So moving on, we have to understand that ultimately these world governments have a much larger play at hand here. And when I say play, I'm talking about power play or chess play. Yes, are they going against each other? Are they constantly at odds with one another? Absolutely. But we also have to consider that as much as that they're at odds with one another, they're also partnering with one another in certain things. It's kind of like having a hate-love relationship with a sibling. You're super close with them, but there's certain things you keep from them still. Okay, so if we pull up an article, and I'm putting it up on the screen now if you're on YouTube, according to the BBC.com, and I quote, "The report identifies 100 more detention sites than previous investigations have shown, based on analysis of satellite imagery, interviews with eyewitness, media reports, and official documents. More than 60 detention sites were worked upon between July 2019 and July 2020, while 14 camps are still under construction," the report said. Around half, this is big, around half of the new centers are higher security facilities, which could suggest a shift towards prison-style facilities, reports author Nathan Rooser said. End quote. Okay, this is interesting. Here's the thing about the concentration camps, and I hate to use that word, but unfortunately there's no other name I could really give it. They've been around for many years. They've been around since the early 90s. That's when the document details that this deal was struck in between the US and China. But the thing about this is that at the time, it was much easier for secrets to be kept. Again, this was just before the internet age and before things were much easier to access. Now, with that being said, China has taken measures all across the country to ban certain things. Like, for example, if I'm not mistaken, there's no Google in China. There's no Facebook in China. They have their own versions of it. So the whole idea of you trying to get onto an American-based website in China is very difficult, which means that there's a sense of control and authoritarianism that, okay, politically, I guess we can disagree with, but that's not the point here. The point here is that they're keeping things secretive for many different reasons, obviously for national security reasons, but mainly because they want to protect these concentration camps that obviously do terrible harm and torture to actual human beings on the front of things, but on the back end of things, completely immoral, unethical experimentation is going on. I don't know personally if I support this type of experimentation. I don't know if I'm against it, but all I can tell you is that there seems to be a sort of race for some type of hybrid human-animal or human EBE or even animal EBE experimentation occurring. And some of the devices used that this document has implied is that some of the devices harness the understanding of spirituality, of science, and knowledge that has been given to us from technologically advanced EBEs, which may in fact be AIs or may in fact be biological beings. And I'll get to that in a little bit because that connects back to this. So we have to sit there and we have to say, okay, should this become public? Because there comes a point where so many things that go public are just not necessary for the rest of the world to know. And the question doesn't become, should we agree with them trying to hide it or not? The question becomes, do we think that morally and ethically this should be able to be continued on a basis that is still very secretive? I mean, okay, fine. For example, the BBC, they found a bunch of concentration camps, and there's tons of reports from The Guardian, from New York Times, from CNN. Many different reputable sites and sources and journalists have worked on this in order to make sure that they have ascertained the veracity of the information they're reporting. But I think, and just hear me out here, there is a proposal that these journalists are purposely being fed this information in order to keep them at bay. Okay, now that doesn't mean that a journalist is going to try to break into these concentration camps. I mean, first off, any reasonable journalist wouldn't even try. The facilities are way too high tech. And secondly, I don't think any journalist would even want to begin with. I mean, journalists do field work, but I don't think that kind of field work is a little bit of a different type, if you know what I mean. Now, what I said a couple minutes ago having to do with EBEs that are either biological or AI, there's a big difference here, because if these doctors or scientists within these underground concentration camps in China that are really experimenting on hybrid testing, if this is really legitimate, are they using the genes from EBEs such as the Greys? Because here's the thing, the Greys, we know for a fact, don't have any reproductive organs, which means that they're artificially biological. And I know those two words kind of contradict one another, but you understand what I'm trying to say. And so the thing that we then have to ask is, are these AIs trying to tell the scientists or the human race overall how to crossbreed? Is there some type of advantage? Are they deceiving us? or what else is going on there? And ultimately, that's the question we have to ask. Even though we may not find the answer, there's only a handful of answers that we can extrapolate into that would prove to be reasonable enough for us to conclude. So that's number one. Number two is, are there other EBEs that have reproductive organs that may not actually be artificial or artificially biological? Are they purely biological? Are they the ones that are teaching us how to crossbreed, or are we left on our own? That's what it comes down to. Ultimately, that's what it is, because we have to understand that as much as we'll never find out about it, that doesn't mean we shouldn't discuss it and we shouldn't consider it. And I think that ultimately this is a perfect setup that the US government has to put underground hybrid experimentation labs, not just underground within their own country, but within countries that people would least suspect. And so what happens here is that even though politicians on the front end know nothing about this except for maybe a handful, if that, because the hybrid program I know is extremely classified to the point where certain presidents don't even know. We then have to ask, who are the people negotiating these deals? The ones who say, okay, you can have a base set up in our country here, and so long as we can do this, this, and that. There's always a quid pro quo. There's always a deal involved. There's always something going on. And it's unfortunate that it has to tie back into politics, but that's just the way it is. It's one of the shitty things about this, the way society is set up, but because they're the ones making the decisions. But why has nobody else come out and spoken about this? That's what I want to know. And again, I mentioned this earlier in the episode, but I'm a little hesitant to put this document out simply because the way in which I obtained it was a little bit iffy as well, and that's the most I'm going to say about that. But ultimately, let's think for a second and understand that China may not be the only country where these type of experiments are set up. And for example, the US might have made agreements with China to have crossbreeding experimentation in their country, and then, for example, they may be using Iran or Russia for another type of program that has nothing to do with crossbreeding. It seems as though whoever made this decision to experiment and make under the table deals with these other countries seems to be strategically doing it in a way that people would least suspect. And an example of this concentration camp in China, hundreds of them actually, is a prime example of how to keep things quiet and how to keep everybody at bay. Because it's so closed off, you can't even fly a drone in there. There's some places in the United States, for example, that are supposed to be classified by government agencies that people have flown drones into, and they've gotten in legal trouble after that, but they were still able to get it in there. In China, you can't even get a drone in there. It's very simple. You can't do anything. So I wish I honestly knew more about this particular subject. I really did. I really do, actually. But again, if we just sift through, and I'm putting it up on the screen right now, if we just sift through some articles, like for example, the Washington Post, new evidence of China's concentration camps shows its hardening resolve to wipe out the Uyghurs. And I apologize if I butchered that word. But again, these camps are just a front. And I'm not saying that terrible things don't occur there. They absolutely do. But we need to look beyond that. And I know it's a vast accusation that I'm making. I understand that. But that shouldn't stop us from discussing these types of things. So please let me know what you guys think. It's very interesting to see how this would tie in, for example, with the Council of 13, or with other bloodlines, and with other different types of stronghold families that I did an episode on that'll be coming out next week, having to do with who makes these types of decisions and all that. So it would be really interesting to see, but I don't want to extrapolate and create some type of proposal or theory where there is none. So thank you very much, guys, for watching. I hope you guys like the new setup. Please let me know in the comments what you think of both this topic and the setup, the camera quality, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you.